Hey everybody, welcome to UX Chats, where we sit down with other senior designers to solve real challenges that designers face every day. My name is Taylor Palmer. I'm here with Jordan Bowman, and we're the creators of UX tools.
Hey there.
Today, our guest is Trae Winterton. Trae, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm excited to be a part of the show today.
Thanks. Trae, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been in tech for a handful of years now. I originally started in just customer support and then moved into analytics on like Excel stuff. And then the real problem there was all the numbers showed me that our product was the issue and that we could really make things a lot better if we fixed our product. So then I started really getting passionate about making good products because good products are sticky, good products require less support, and really kind of figured out that there was a discipline called UX. Then wasn't even aware to that. And so long story short, I was looking at what skill sets I would need to get one of these jobs, trying to like create an education plan for myself. And I saw an entry level position. I applied for it, got it, and the rest is history. Ended up not going to go pursue some of those like design type things that I saw all these UX roles required, and was able to just use my curiosity and current intellectual ability to land in research. Stayed in research for almost 4 years, and then this September will be 2 years as a product manager. So kind of been around the place, different sizes of businesses from 50 employees to thousands of employees. Back down to kind of more of a smaller spot right now, but that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent, thank you. I think that kind of toured history that you've taken there is going to be really interesting for our topic today as well. So thanks a lot for that, and we're excited to have you join us.
Yeah, thanks, Trae. We are really excited to see your background is so cool. So let's get right into the scenario that we're talking about today. So let's say I'm a designer I'm probably a sole designer working at sort of a small company, and I have a very short timeline and small budget for research. So what kinds of specific research methods can I sort of fall back on as, highest bang for my buck type of options? Let's start with you, Trae.
Yeah, that's a great topic. It's a little bit tricky because you're talking about having both arms tied behind your back right now, where you're short on time and short on budget. So I'll probably kind of dance between the two just a little bit. If you're really short on both, which I know a lot of people are, the easiest way to get people involved is to find people with passion. I listened to the episode with Varun. He talked a lot about, not a lot, but a moment about compensation and compensating your participants and saying, here's $25, here's $100. But we're talking a scenario where you don't necessarily have that. So what can you get to motivate someone to participate? And for me, I find passion. So now you're hunting a market. You're looking for a specific type of person who will give you their thoughts and input for free because they care enough about what you're doing. And that's a tricky thing. You're looking for, I think, in design and product, we talk about early adopters, people who want it so bad that they would take like a lesser version of the product just to have their hands on it sooner. Finding those people and taking the time to write out what that person looks like, a description for that individual, is going to be your first step, because if you're short on money, you can't afford to be paying them incentives. So that would be my first throw out there. Do you guys have something you do when you're short on money as far as recruiting goes?
So I think it kind of depends on the question you're trying to answer. I sort of have some fallbacks that I kind of rely on depending on the question. Because I think when you're doing research, the takeaway from it, you're not just doing research just to go through the motions. There's an actual takeaway. And I think the takeaway is learning, is insights that you can then apply to your designs. And so when we're talking about what's most efficient, it's the number of insights per time and money spent that you get from the research method. And so I think, there's not one size fits all method. But I like what you're saying about recruiting, going and finding specific people that, are early adopters or just really passionate about whatever product you're making. And so one of the ways that I like to kind of dig into those people's minds and their mental models and stuff is user interviews. I feel like user interviews are a very efficient form of research because they're so flexible and adaptable, and you're sitting down in front of somebody and picking their brain. So you can, if you design it correctly, get tons of insights from that. And, that's the goal, insights. So another thought, yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I kind of branching off of what you were saying there, Jordan, and kind of combining the two, I think a little bit. Like Jordan, you talked a little bit about like finding maximum insights, right? Like the most insights you can get in kind of one motion. I think there's also a question of sample size there. Like, what do you need to answer the question? Like you said, Jordan, is one person going to be able to answer that question really deeply for you? The sample size of one usually isn't ever really recommended, but right, we're limited here in time and resources. Or do you need like a bunch of small insights from a larger sample size? There's kind of this axis here, right, of like the depth of the insight versus the number of insights. And like two come to mind for me there, which is a user interview if you're trying to go deep, or a survey if you're trying to go broad. And then to play on what Trae said, I've actually found that if I'm really short on time, like we're talking hours short, then I can actually reach out to some of those passionate people I've talked to before and do something more like a quick email to them, right? Like, here's an idea, here's a thing I made, here's a prototype, here's a picture, here's something. Could you react to this for me? Can we riff on this together? And if you already have a rapport with that person, like Trae said, you found these passionate people, then sometimes they'll respond same day, right? And you can start learning really quickly. So that was something that came to mind, but it sounded like you had another thought you wanted to follow up with there, Jordan.
Well, I just wanted to say, and this fits with what you were saying too, when people think of user interviews, they often think that it's like this hour-long thing where you're sitting down with someone and having this huge in-depth conversation, and you have to be on the balls of your feet, picking up on all of these possible, pathways you can take. But I find that when I'm short on time and money, I can just sit down with one of these people that we're talking about and have a very quick conversation. I mean, I've pulled out tons of insights from a 15-minute conversation with the user. It doesn't have to go really long. I think you need to have a plan before you go in so that you're asking well-crafted questions. But you don't have to just sit there for an hour trying to figure out what to say. You can go for the insights, get them, and then get out of there and go do something else.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that just a little bit. I think something you had said initially was getting the most insights bang for your buck. And I think the whole point of that was to learn. And I think what are we learning is important when we talk about methods here is Taylor learning for his designs, or is Taylor learning so he can tell his boss? And we start talking about like, what is the goal of the learning? And I think that very much so affects sample size and those things. The more you have, the more data you can leverage, you can throw around the room and say, well, I've got 100 users who said this. Well, I've got 1,000 users who said this. And so that matters. But I think the question here comes back to a little bit more of how do we like fly when we're on fire? Kind of like Taylor said, I've got a couple of hours. How do I do this? And I'm gonna throw a name out there. So the person who taught me this, his name's Josh Penrod. I think he's just like an advisor these days. He used to be chief product officer over at Podium. I know he's VP of UX at Ancestry. But I was having lunch with him three years ago or so, and we were chatting about how we acknowledge the other person's turn to talk in our research sessions. But then we transitioned to the subject of how lean can you do it, and he demonstrated live for me at this pizza place we were at how he's done it. And he just had a napkin, he pulled a Sharpie out. I don't know, maybe if you're a designer you carry Sharpies with you. I don't, but if you're going to be doing research, start carrying Sharpies. He started drawing a little UI on the napkin, and then he kind of did like the crazy eights thing where you fold it, and then he said, okay, how would you do this? And just use this Sharpie. I'm going to now slide the napkin over to you, use the Sharpie for a click. So touch for where you would click, I'll flip it and touch it and touch. And we just did a little, just to demonstrate the method to me, a little UX study right there in the pizza place on the back of a napkin. You've heard back of the napkin math, but have you ever done a back of the napkin usability test? I literally have.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So we talk about like methods of being scrappy, and I just wanted to acknowledge that they're two ends of the spectrum of I need something fast that holds weight, and I need something fast because I need something fast for me, because I myself am in a spot where I could use some insight. I think those are two different places to be. Have you guys found yourselves in those different situations?
You know, when thinking about speed, especially, I loved the napkin story. Josh Penrod is great, by the way. I got myself thinking about like what resources are already available at my disposal. So in that situation, Josh had a napkin and, because he's a designer, a Sharpie apparently, and so I think about like on kind of a different level. Like on my team, what resources are already at my disposal? Is there someone at the company who's already got contact with the folks I need to talk to? Are we already paying for an app that can do this? Do we already have some sort of in-product survey running where I could get these insights? And like knowing what exists already adds a bunch of arrows to your quiver, because you're able to pull those out whenever you need them and kind of know what's at your disposal. So I think that's a story about using the resources on hand, right? If you need to get something really fast and that's what you've got, you kind of make it work and you learn what you need to learn. So I think that's a lot of what goes into being really efficient, right? And moving really quickly with the time allowed.
Yeah, and I love that story because I love usability tests. I think they're like my favorite research method, just because you're showing people tangible work, rather than theoretically verbalizing what you want them to imagine. So you're testing concrete stuff, and you're getting really actionable takeaways that you can go and immediately get into Figma and apply to your design. So I feel like if you're just going to pick one research method to use for the rest of your life, for me it would be usability tests. Just because of how practical and actionable they are for me as a designer. So what do you guys think about usability tests in general? And would you pick usability tests as if you only had one research method for the rest of your life? Would you pick usability tests or something else?
I'll let Taylor take this one first, because I'll probably get on a soapbox. So Taylor, what did you say?
All
What do you
right.
want to say about this?
I'm excited, Trae. Oh man, one for the rest of my life. Let me put in a quick plug as well for card sorts. I think you can learn a lot really quickly with a good card sort if you've got the right materials to run it. And like in the area of COVID and remote work, I think we're still finding the right ways to do those really quickly and easily. But especially in person, if you've just got like sticky notes or index cards or anything, you can just write down a bunch of ideas and start clustering and grouping and using that as a mechanism to pull thoughts out of someone's head. For the rest of my life, though, I'd probably have to go use their interview, because I mean, am I allowed to do usability testing in the interview? I think some would call blasphemy on that.
Yeah.
But I really love talking to people and digging out those insights. And like you said, Jordan, it can go really long, if there's just so many insights coming out, or you can tailor it to be really short as well. So that, don't quote me on that, but I think that's what I'd go with. But I'm excited to hear Trae's response as well.
Now, this is where me having the UX researcher background instead of the UX designer background comes in. Is I'm going to split a hair here.
Nice.
with usability testing, you have moderated and unmoderated usability testing.
That's true. Yeah.
And so Taylor just asked, can you merge the two? And I say yes. You can have a moderated usability test. I've been in a usability test where someone clicked something that wasn't the right spot. I'm going to pause you right there. That obviously didn't take us to the next screen. What were you hoping would happen? And you can ask them. You can have an engaging thing as you use that visual as like a common ground to establish communication, because I think that's really what visuals help do when you get to this test. Is it's communicating where you're going with your product, where you're going with your services, and you can use the elements as a reference point. We might use the word drop down and they'll use the word menu, but we're still talking about the same thing, and we can start to find that common ground in what it's like for a user to use the product. So for me, I would say a moderated usability test, because I'm curious, like Taylor, I want to have the things there, and then like Jordan, I want to be able to ask the questions. So it is tricky. How do you get both? But I think scheduling that time is important. And one plug on that is, if you're going to do a moderated usability test, have a goal. You're either going to be looking for more design feedback or more like temperature and thought feedback. You can't get both out of the test. One is now supplementing the other, and you need to choose which one you're focusing on.
Yeah,
I do. Oh, can I go? I just want to double tap on one thing Taylor said before my thoughts like go away from that. Was to know what you have. Specifically, I have a story from this week. Currently, I'm at a company called BrainStorm. Very cool. And we're implementing a tool for our sales teams and our customer success called Gong. Some of you have heard of Gong, some of you haven't, but basically it records all your calls and it transcribes them. And then you can start doing auto tagging and looking for keywords. And there's a lot of reasons a sales team would like this, but there's just as many reasons a product team would like this. And so one of our directors of customer success reached out to me yesterday and just said, hey, we've got this tool. We just got it. What do you want? And I was so excited that he knew that I wanted, like he knew me personally enough and my interest in product enough to say, this is the person who's going to start having tags he wants pulled, data he wants collected. And I didn't have to pay for it. It didn't come out of my department's budget. It's something that sales could justify out of their sales budget. I think we've all seen research budgets be underappreciated and sales budgets be overappreciated at times. Lean into that. Use sales tools. Convince the sales team that they need this just as much as you do. If your sales teams aren't using Gong yet, convince your sales teams to go get Gong with your own agenda in mind. Like there's a lot you can do in that way. What tools have what tools have you guys used from the rest of your company that you found product value out of?
I was actually going to roll into what you said about sales. And in the last episode, you heard us talk with Varun a lot about like partnering with those teams. I have found myself doing impromptu research by coupling with those teams. I'm currently at a startup called Range, and they're really good at pulling me into sales conversations. Like, this company wants this thing. We don't have it yet. We think you should talk to them about it so we could figure out like how we might build that. And we went into a demo call where we were actually going to show one of our features to a customer. And instead, I kind of took a deep breath and I said, would you mind going through it instead? And we'll talk about it as you go. And I could hear everybody in the room kind of like gulp, as we waited for this to happen. And they're like, sure. And we did this like impromptu usability test plus like sales call. And it was really helpful for me because I'd only been there a couple of weeks. And so I was learning a bunch and like kind of building this relationship with this customer. We had a lot of back and forth. And so it was I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit in that method. But I think there are a lot of really cool tools. I think Jordan was going to say something, but I can circle back to that.
Yeah. So before I talk about tools, I just want to touch on something that you said, Trae, about having a specific goal. When you talk about efficiency and making sure that you're not wasting time or money, you need to proactively make sure that you have goals and specific goals for every single thing you do. I feel like too many times designers in particular, not researchers, but designers in particular, go into a research project or a user interview or a test or whatever without a really concrete specific goal. And that kind of screws them over as far as efficiency goes because it just drones on. They don't know when to stop or what they're looking for. So I feel like that was a really important point that I just wanted to touch on. And, as far as tools go, there's I feel like there's more and more research related tools coming out all the time. I mean, Gong is one example. I see them almost all the time on Product Hunt. There's always some kind of tool coming out. I've used Maze before for unmoderated usability tests. And another tool that I really love is called Dovetail, where it's it helps you analyze and pull out insights from your research. And one thing it does is it transcribes your videos for you and helps you tag specific points in the video where an insight occurred and things like that. So that's one of my favorite tools.
I used this is at Lucid in a previous role I was in. Our team got access to a sales tool as well. And I can't remember what it was called, but it sounds like it was similar to Gong in that it would record all the outbound sales calls, automatically transcribe them, and then people would kind of mark them up. And so we could use them for a number of reasons, but you could use them to be a fly on the wall and kind of hear what customers are saying and get some insight into how those conversations go. You could pretty quickly find how many conversations contain certain keywords and how often people are talking about that. And then something I really like to do in those scenarios is actually try and reach back out and see if I can be in touch with that person, right? This person said this line, that is exactly what I'm looking for. Are they in a position for me to follow up? Like, is it okay while they're in the sales pipeline if I have a conversation with them? And so again, we've talked a lot about partnerships with those other teams and departments, but getting into those work streams, I think, offers you a lot more opportunity to have different methods and to have kind of a variety of touch points. So those are some of my thoughts on kind of combining those tools.
Yeah, I want to go on that even just a little bit more. I actually have some notes written down. I knew the topic before we sat down, what we were going to be discussing. And one of the notes I wrote down was for the question specifically, what research methods can give you the most bang for your buck when you're a pinch or working with limited timeline? I wrote down, get a question into your sales group. You're attending the calls better, but I was thinking for like scale for volume, saying I need all my salespeople asking a question on their next calls for the next week. And that's a very similar thing. So I'm looking for volume. You were looking for quality in the sense that you wanted to be their person, but it's that similar avenue of using what you've got, using the team you've got. And the point I want to drive home there is if you do lean on your teams, you build trust. And I'm sure, like you said, everyone gasped. You're like, I want to do this usability test, and the room went silent. But I'm sure by the end of the meeting, the rest of the team saw that like a healthy discussion was had and that they can trust Taylor with future customers. You build your street cred as you put yourself out on a limb that way. And I think it's kind of tricky when you say, I need to take someone who doesn't trust me, scare them just a little bit, show them that they don't need to be scared, and then they trust me. It's this weird like loop of psychology, but it really helps to get the rest of the org bought into, at least, even if they're not data driven, even if they're really focused on like renewals and closures and stuff, they're really sales driven and not that product focused. If they still know that you're not going to mess things up when you get on the call, your freedom and your access just like doubled. You're going to have a lot more ability to work quickly in a limited timeline than you did before. Jordan, what have you done to like build those relationships with your teams?
Oh, I'm constantly talking to sales. I mentioned this in our last episode, but I'm constantly talking to sales and support. And like I said last episode, it's because they're the ones that are on the front lines, always interfacing with customers. I mean, that's their job every single day, all day. And so I talk to them about who I should talk to for this specific project that we're working on. Or, I know that a lot of users face this particular problem. Who's someone that I can talk to that faces that problem on a regular basis? Sometimes I'll just straight up ask them, how do you think we can solve this for our users? So basically, I involve them as much as I can, and I try to show them that I listen and that I actually follow through on what I'm going to say. And I try to avoid silos of departments.
I've got an experience from my last role. I was at a startup called Neighbor, and had a really great relationship with kind of the sales and what they called the activation team, people who were in charge of outreach. And eventually we got it worked out to where they had all of these agents making outbound calls, talking to people, figuring out why they weren't kind of converting into customers. And then they would come back and fill out all this sales data about like why the customer dropped out of the funnel. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And we were able to slot in a couple of more like product related questions into that feedback survey. And so it was kind of vicarious research, right? Because this was a salesperson who had talked to someone who's filling this back out. But we were able to generate reports and say like, okay, for the past 6 weeks, how many people dropped out for this reason? And then have a whole bunch of data points to take into the product and say, this isn't performing, this isn't doing what it should be because these people shouldn't be dropping out for this reason. So to kind of combine everything we've just talked about, it was like partnering with another team, it was using like a really quick method of just having them answer one question, and then like gathering that almost in an instant whenever we needed to pull that data, and using a sales tool to do it. So kind of to tie up all of those ends, it was really exciting to do, and it was a really cool way for the UX team to be able to be just constantly gathering research in the background. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, you caveated it there that it's vicarious research. And I felt like almost in your tone, you were apologizing or explaining that like, hey, I get that I didn't do it myself, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about bulletproof research. You didn't invite me on to say, how can you make it so no one can question your research? That's not what we're here talking about today. We're talking about how can we fast and learn quickly. And sometimes when you're in those situations, anyone who's been part of a lean startup, I know the user base you're looking for is mostly solo designers. These are the people who need that opposite end of the spectrum. We're not looking to be bulletproof. We're looking to be fast. We don't have the time or the resources to move that quickly. I wanted to throw out one of my favorite ways to handle this. That's a little more end to end. It does require a little bit of budget, but it's not as high budget as some of these other things. So my favorite thing is to find your users where they are. I talked about it at the beginning. Find your early adopters, but one I think is finding them where they are in their real lives, not getting them to come to you, not getting them to hop online. But let's say you were wanting to talk to salespeople at software companies, not the product people or whatever. Go to a coffee shop near your nearest business park, put up a little sign that says, if you're a salesperson, I'll buy your coffee, and wait, and just like work. Do your job. You don't have to quit working. You can keep doing your daily task with there. And then as people come in, you usually get a few people and they're like, hey, free coffee. I'm already here for coffee anyway. Or in Utah, it's going to be their soda drinks. We have tons of those everywhere. But finding people where they are, if it's at a mall, go set up at a little chair at a mall. Go do what you got to do. Don't be embarrassed. Put the shame out the door. You're here to learn a thing, and be willing to spend like a little bit of money if you can. But people love convenience. People love free things, especially like in the moment. It feels like they won a contest or something. So finding these people where they are and just taking that time outside of the office, leave the office, go if you can. If you're if your market works that way, if your COVID restrictions work that way, leave and go find these people because they exist. They're out trying to live their lives. You don't need an hour of their time. If you've done your prep work where you figured out what you want to talk, what you're trying to learn, you can ask them their 2 questions, you answer 3 questions, you can ask them to click twice in your prototype and record it. We're trying to be fast and quick in meeting people where they are and not asking for much from them is another helpful way to do that. What has been maybe your favorite way of getting people excited about research?
That's a good question. And we're coming up on time, so maybe we can wrap it up on this one. Jordan, do you have any thoughts on that one?
So solving their problem for them. This is where I like to talk to support because they always talk to people who have problems. And so I honestly very rarely pay people to do usability tests or user interviews because they know before we get on the call that I'm trying to solve a problem for them. And I work on an app that commercial real estate brokers use. And they use this app all day for their work. And a lot of the success of their career depends on how well this app works. So it's very easy for me to say, I'm going to try to solve this problem for you. Can we just jump on a call for 15 or 30 minutes and talk about it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, Trae, if you were talking about exciting the participants or the people around you, but I think you can excite both. I really liked Jordan's answer. That like when people realize that you are doing something that helps them, they will obviously become much more passionate about what you're doing. And I would say for kind of team members around you, I think helping someone see how differently a project goes when you have access to that information, when you have like research in hand, because one project might just be endlessly debating a topic until like the person with the most authority wins and something ships out the door, versus like having that data in hand, really quickly making clear decisions and pushing something out the door in half the time. Once you get a taste of that, like you can never go back. And I realize that organizations are at different levels of maturity with research, but hopefully everybody's able to bring that into their team and give everybody a sample of that. But I appreciate you bringing us, Trae, back to what our topic today, which was, moving fast, staying lean, getting those quick insights. And I think that's a great way to end it. So I really appreciate your thoughts there. Thanks a lot for the conversation today, Trae. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot. Where can people learn more about you or kind of follow along with what you're doing?
I would say just follow me on LinkedIn. It's just Trae Winterton, TraeWinterton. And keep an eye out. I'm always trying to do different things. And if you ever want to work together with me on something, we currently are hiring a product manager. If I ever have little entrepreneurial ventures of my own, if you ever want to get involved, let me know. I love meeting new people and working on passionate projects.
Yeah, thanks, Trae. It's been really great to have you. You obviously know your stuff, and I feel like there's a lot of great takeaways that our listeners can take from this episode. And we'll be sure to include all of the stuff you mentioned in our show notes.
For sure. So thanks for listening, everyone, today. UX Chats is a podcast from UX Tools. You can find out more about us at uxtools.co.
Be sure to follow or subscribe. And if you found this episode useful, please leave us a rating or a review, or simply share the episode with somebody you know. It'd be a huge help.
We'll see you next time.